And so if we look at this, they tell you the first sentence, the equivalence statement. And then they ask you, well, if there's 12 inches in 1 foot, how many inches is 4 feet? Okay, so I'm going to call randomly on somebody. Okay, Jared, what do you think the answer is? Jared?
1 second, I think. Probably like D.
D is correct. 48.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the way of thinking about it. This is the equivalence, right? And so we have 4 feet. So we want to multiply this 1 by 4. So notice multiplying on both sides. And we get 48. Now, you probably didn't think of it that way, but that's what people who can do this intuitively, and then Jared, that's probably what you did in your head too. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this one. Now you're given the equivalence statement in the first sentence. There's 4 quarts to 1 gallon. Well, if you have 20 quarts, how many gallons would that be? Okay, again, I'm going to call randomly on somebody. Okay, Tessa, what do you think? Tessa, I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, it would be 80 gallons.
Okay, so 80. Okay, so anybody else get a different answer? Okay, now notice that if we write this equivalence statement, we want to have 20 quarts. So this 4 needs to become 20. All right? So we need that 4 to become 20. So notice if you multiply this by 5, all right, so it's not 80. All right, and that's a common issue with these. You know, sometimes it's not always easy to know when you multiply or divide. And that's true for me too. You know, I can do that too. So having structure is very helpful. So notice since we have quarts, we want to find out how many 4s go in the 20, which is essentially what we're doing here when we figure out what times 4 is 20. And so the answer over here, oops, my bad, I put 4, I'm 5. I reacted to what I see. That's probably why I did. I saw 4. All right. So let's go ahead and try to come up with a method that all of us can do and feel confident in. Okay. So when we solve these kind of problems, essentially what you're doing is you're taking equivalence statements and using them to decide whether you multiply or divide. Okay. Now Google will help you out. So with Google, we just go ahead and type it in and it'll tell us. But if we don't have Google and we're only given these 6 equivalence statements, then that's what we have to deal with. And I know the SAT really likes these things. They like to see that kind of reasoning. Okay, so we'll go through these and then this will be all we have for today. All right, so we want to go from tablespoons to cups. Okay, I'm calling somebody. Tablespoons to cups. Carmelo, do we have an equivalence statement? Tablespoons to cups.
Yes.
Yeah, it's right here. So on the left side, so we can go directly from tablespoons to cups. Okay? Now, again, this is the more formal way of structuring the problem, so we can go directly from tablespoons to cups. This is the equivalence statement of tablespoons to cups. We have 580, so we have 580 tablespoons. All right? Why is that a 1? I'm pointing at this number, is that a 1?
No.
No, so we divide. Okay, because every 16 tablespoons is worth 1. So how many 16s go into the 580 tablespoons? That's why we're dividing. Okay, and so then you get your answer, whatever that is. Okay? Now that one we could go straight to the, what am I trying to say, the unit that we wanted. We're not going to be able to do that with number 2. We have cups, 30 cups. We want to find out how many quarts there are. So we want quarts, we have cups. So the only 2 things that have cups are up here on the left, and neither of them go to quarts. But notice the pints goes to quarts. So we're going to have to use 2. We're going to have to go from cups to pints, and then we're going to have to go from pints to quarts. And the 2 equivalence statements we can use, one of them on the lower left, 2 cups equals 1 pint, and the other on the upper right, 2 pints equals 1 quart. All right? So we have, was it 30? I thought it was 30. So we have 30 cups. We want to go from cups to pints. Here's the equivalence statement. We have cups. That's a 2. It's not a 1, so we divide. Because every 2 is worth 1. So how many 2s do we have in 30? Okay, now we have pints. We have 15 pints. We want to go from pints to quarts. Here's the equivalence statement. We have pints. That's not a 1, so we divide. Because every 2 pints is worth 1. So how many 2s go into the 15? Now we have our answer. Right, that's what people do. They convert these to be per 1, or they're given to you, and they decide if they multiply or divide the unit you have. If that's not a 1, you divide. If it is, you multiply. So 7.5 quarts is the same as 30 cups. Which I think is, what, 4 quarts to a gallon, so almost 2 gallons. Pretty sure about that. I always get 2s and 4s goofed up in my head. Let's see. Yeah, 4 quarts to a gallon. So a little less than 2 gallons. All right, now we got the last one. Now the last one is the one that's a little more involved because we can't go directly from gallons to milliliters. The only one that has gallons goes to quarts. The only other one that has quarts goes to pints. The only other one that has pints goes to cups. And since we want milliliters, we got to get tablespoons, and so then we go from cups to tablespoons. Now, if this was Google, you wouldn't have to worry about all that. You just go 1 gallon equals how many milliliters, and Google will tell you the answer. But we don't have Google. We're going to be primitive. So we're going to go from gallons to quarts, and then we're going to go from quarts to pints, and then we're going to go pints to cups, and then we're going to go cups to tablespoons, and then finally we can use this last lower right equivalence. We're going to go from tablespoons to milliliters. Okay? So the equivalences we're going to use. We got 4 quarts equals 1 gallon. Okay, we have 2 pints equals 1 quart. Then we have 2 cups equals 1 pint. And then we have 16 tablespoons equals 1 cup. And finally, once we get tablespoons, then we have 1 tablespoon equals to 15 milliliters. Okay, so I just wrote them down all on the board. Here's our arrow map. Now again, this is a more structured way of doing a problem. You know, when you find you have advanced, complicated problems, getting a structure is very helpful. Okay, you can at least get the process initiated, right? Okay, so now we're just going to go down and decide whether we multiply or divide. So we have gallons. We want quarts. We have gallons, that's a 1, so we're going to multiply. because every one is worth 4. So this one is worth 4. That's why we multiply. Okay, so now we have 4 quarts. Okay, now we have quarts and we want pints. Okay. Okay, well, here's the quarts. We have quarts. That's a 1, so we're going to multiply. Because every 1 quart is worth 2. So we have 4, so we have 8 pints. Okay, now we want to go from pints to cups. We have pints. We have 8 pints. We want to go from pints to cups. Here we have pints. That's a 1. Again, we multiply because every 1 is worth 2. Okay, now we have 16 cups. Okay, we want to go from cups to tablespoons. Here's our equivalents. We have cups. We have cups. That's a 1. So we multiply 16 because every 1 cup is worth 16. All right, so we multiply 16. I think this is 256. All right, almost there. All right, so now we have tablespoons. We have 256 tablespoons. And that's a lot of right? We want milliliters. Here's our equivalents. We have tablespoons. That's a 1. So we multiply because every 1 is worth 15. All right, so you should get 256 times whatever 15 is. That's the answer. Now here's what people do. They just literally go through that and decide whether they multiply or divide. So once you know you're multiplying everything, now you know, just multiply those 5 numbers. Since you started with 1, 1 times 4 times 2 times 2 times 16 times 15, enter, answer. All right, and so if you set up the organization, you could probably do the rest in your head if you get a good understanding of where this is coming from. Okay, now I like to do it by looking at the equivalents, and if it's a 1, multiply. If it's not a 1, divide. So if you have quarts, you would have divided. If you have gallons, you would have multiplied. Some people like to think bigger unit to smaller unit to bigger unit. To me, that's a little complicated because it's dealing with abstract ideas about big and small. This keeps it simple, and it's based upon the idea of multiplication and division. So this is just my way of explaining that. And I know other teachers have other ways of explaining stuff. Well, that's good because you have a variety, right? So this is kind of what we just did. Okay, so it's just a summary of, the unit conversion process in a more organized fashion. Okay? Well, we're good.